So let's just start by you telling us who you are and about your amazing, inspiring story.
My name is Chris Wark. I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer when I was 26 years old, and it was just a huge shock. For any cancer patient at any age, the diagnosis is terrible news, but I mean, you just don't see it coming when you're that young. And leading up to the diagnosis, I was really excited about my life. I was investing in real estate. I was an entrepreneur. I was a musician. I was writing songs and playing shows, making plans to go on tour. And in 2003, I started having these abdominal pains. And I thought I didn't think it was a big deal. I just thought, well, my body can heal. I've never had any health problems before. I'm sure whatever it is will sort itself out. But unfortunately, it didn't. It progressively got worse. And so toward the end of that year, I mean, I was just having these really intense abdominal pains, sharp pains, and then like a dull aching pain that would wake me up in the middle of the night. And finally, my wife convinced me to go to the doctor because typical male, I'm fine. And frankly, I was like too busy to get sick. You know, I was like, I don't have time for that. Like, I'm taking over the world. So after a series of, tests and misdiagnosis, I was referred to a gastroenterologist who did a colonoscopy. And I woke up from the procedure and he said, you've got a golf ball size tumor in your large intestine. And hopefully it's benign, but it could be colon cancer. We took a biopsy, we'll send it to the lab, we'll call you as soon as we know. And, I was just coming out of the anesthesia when he was talking, and so it was like, it just felt like this weird dream, that didn't make sense. And I looked at my wife and she was like sobbing on the nurse's shoulder, and I was just like what? The next morning, the phone rings like really early. When the doctor calls you like really early in the morning, it's never good news. And he said, listen, you got colon cancer, man. Like, we got to get you into surgery right away. Get this thing out of you before it spreads and kills you. And we'll have a surgeon call you to schedule the surgery. And I'm just like, okay. You don't know what to think or what to say. I mean, and this is what so many cancer patients deal with. I mean, they get a diagnosis and immediately they're rushed into treatment before they have any idea what their disease is about, the cause of their disease, what the treatment's going to be. And so I was very much a typical cancer patient, clueless, got a diagnosis, and then let's get you on the conveyor belt.
Terrified.
Terrified. A couple weird things happened, but the original surgeon forgot to call me. And then I went for a second opinion and was referred to another surgeon who was supposed to be the best in Memphis or whatever, right? So I feel like it was serendipitous that I got with a different surgeon. But they wanted to do surgery just within a couple days. This was like just a few days before Christmas. So I'm like, can I not be in the hospital on Christmas? Like, I'm already super depressed and I would rather not be in the hospital on Christmas. So we postponed it about a week. I went in on December 30th. They cut out a third of my large intestine where the tumor was. They took out a bunch of lymph nodes. When I woke up, they said, it's worse than we thought. It was supposed to be laparoscopic surgery where they make 2 small incisions and put the tools in with a little camera. And when he put the camera in and looked around, he was like, this is not good. We got to cut him open. So they, did a right down the middle, right through my belly button, cut me open. Yeah. So that's when they told me you're stage 3C instead of stage 2. That's what they were hoping for. Stage 2 means it's localized. Stage 3 means it's spread to your lymph nodes. Stage 4 means it's in another organ. So it was on the way to my liver. And they said, look, because you're stage 3, your next step is going to be 9 to 12 months chemotherapy. So I'm just like, on heavy pain medication in the hospital, like, okay, like this is my life now. And a couple things happened in the hospital that were the first sort of red flags. And the first thing that happened was the very first meal that they served me after cutting out a third of my large intestine was a sloppy Joe. The one food menu item that you pretty much can't get in a restaurant, right? The only place you can get a sloppy Joe is like summer camp, the military, prison maybe, and apparently hospitals. And so they like put it in front of me and I'm like, gross. You know, I mean, I'm depressed, I'm in the hospital, I have cancer, and then and this is lunch? Not to mention the fact that red meat is a group 2 carcinogen, specifically linked to colon cancer. So they're like feeding the colon cancer patient like cancer-causing food. So I started thinking like, why are they serving such terrible food to sick people? Like, this doesn't make sense. The other thing that happened in the hospital was the day they told me I could go home, my surgeon came in and to do, one final check. And we were talking about recovery. And I said, is there any food that I need to avoid? Because I was thinking like, I don't eat the wrong thing. I don't want to, hot sauce mess up the stitches. I mean, they literally took a section of my intestines out and sewed the 2 tubes back together, right? Everything that I eat is going to pass through that area. And so I just didn't want to eat the wrong thing. And he was like, no, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer. So again, I'm getting this reinforced message that the healthcare industry, the medical industry, has no regard for nutrition. Like, what you eat doesn't matter, right? That's what they're telling me. And I'm like, well, I don't believe that. When I was in college, I worked at Wild Oats, which got bought out by Whole Foods. So I was around healthy food. I knew what organic food was. I knew about juicing and stuff like that. And I wasn't doing any of it, okay? But I definitely understood that there was health food and junk food. And leading up to my diagnosis, I was a junk food connoisseur. I mean, I was on the go. I was eating fast food every day. McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC. That was lunch, whatever fast food place was closest, and I felt like eating. Breakfast was some kind of microwave sausage biscuit maybe, or some cereal. And then dinner might be more fast food. I mean, this is it's typical American diet. So but I instinctively knew something is contributing to my disease. I don't know what it is, but I believe we live in a cause and effect world. There's a cause to my disease. I need to figure out what's causing this. What can I do to help myself? I think a lot of patients have that same thought, right? They're like, what can I do to help myself? And the big tragedy about the way our current system is set up is that when a patient goes to the doctor and says why did I get cancer? The doctor often says, well, we don't know, but it's maybe genetic or maybe just bad luck. It wasn't anything you did. And what that does is it turns them into a powerless victim. Mm-hmm. Nothing you did contributed to your disease. Therefore, there's nothing you can do to help yourself. Mm-hmm. Right? You're powerless. Your only hope is us. And, we'll do the best we can. We have state-of-the-art care. You just need to show up for these appointments, get these treatments, and we'll cross our fingers, pat you on the back, give you a little hug, and we got snacks and all kinds of goodies for you. And that puts cancer patients in this position of helplessness and hopelessness. So I didn't understand all that at the time. It's been years of thinking through these things, right? And experiencing it through other survivors as well. But I'm in this position now where I've had surgery, I go home, I'm recovering, and I'm sleeping on the couch because it was just easy. I couldn't get in and out of the bed. And I start thinking about my future. And I'm thinking about my life, what is it going to be like as a chemo patient? Losing my hair and becoming emaciated and being sick and all these things that go with it. And the idea of poisoning my way back to health didn't make sense. Like I couldn't wrap my head around, like, I knew I was sick. I knew I was vulnerable. Like, how would making me sicker help me get better, right? And that's not to say that chemo can't be helpful in some cases, because it can, but I'm very instinctually driven. And so like something inside me was just telling me, like, you can't do this. This is not for you. And I knew how physically weak and vulnerable I was. My physical body was so weak. So my wife and I prayed about it. And I was just like, God, if there's any way besides chemotherapy, just show me. Like, it was just a sincere prayer of desperation, right? Just like, help. Like, here I am, help me. And 2 days later, I got a book. And this book was sent to me by a friend of my dad's who lives in Alaska. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. This book shows up. I start reading it. The guy who wrote it had discovered he had colon cancer, almost 30 years prior, and had seen a lot of people that he knew go through cancer and die, and including his own mom. And so then he gets the diagnosis and decided, well, I don't want to do what they did. And he happened to have a health buddy who said, well, if you're not going to do that, you should start eating raw food, go back to the Garden of Eden, fruits and vegetables only, organic, and you should probably start juicing, right? Juice some carrots. And within a year, his tumor was gone. His body had healed. And so I'm like, I'm reading the story and I'm like, I cannot believe this is here right now. Like, I just knew this was the answer to my prayer. I didn't need anybody. I didn't need anyone else to tell me. Like, I knew it.
Chills.
Yeah. So I was so excited. Like, I called my wife. I mean, I was like pouring through this book and reading, and the book, he was talking about nutrition and the risks of chemotherapy and different things, like, cancer industry or whatever. And I'm pouring through it, and I call my wife and I'm like, you're not going to believe this. This book showed up. Like, I know what I'm going to do, right? We got to get a juicer, like, and I'm just like so excited. And she's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you have to do chemo. Like, what do you mean? And, she's like, I'm at work right now. I can't really talk about this, whatever. And then as soon as I put the phone down, other family members are calling. Chris, we heard you're thinking about not doing chemo, and you need to do exactly what the doctor says. Like, this is serious. I know somebody who tried alternative therapies and they died. And don't you think if there was something better, the doctors would know about it? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm only on like chapter 3 of this book. The reality was, these people love me, right? They love me and they want me to live, right? They weren't my opponents, but they didn't understand like what was happening to me, right? They couldn't understand. And they really wanted the best for me, but it created all of this pressure around me that I didn't know how to deal with. And I wasn't expecting to have to deal with. I thought everybody would just be excited for me, like, go, Chris, And so just to appease the pressure, let me back up. So I converted to a raw vegan diet overnight. Okay, I'm like, I'm doing this. So like, bought a juicer, bought tons of carrots and broccoli and cauliflower and kale, like all this good stuff, and was like, I'll figure this out. Ready, fire, aim. That's sort of my life's MO. So overnight convert, and I'm just thinking, I'm going to overdose on nutrition. Like, let's see what happens. Because I was excited about this idea that, first of all, it gave me some power back when I realized, wait a second, maybe the way I'm living is killing me. That's good news. Because if I contributed to this, maybe I can contribute to healing it. Yes. Right? And I was like, this is giving me so much excitement. And what would happen if I stopped eating all this man-made processed crap and started overdosing on fruits and vegetables? I've never done that before. And again, this was January 2004. So no one in Memphis was talking about the raw food diet, okay? Like, I'm sure everybody in California knew what it was. But back then, like, it wasn't cool. You know, remember, there's no Instagram. Like, there was no, like, raw food hotties and celebrities and whatever, right? So it was just this weird fringe diet, like weirdest of the weird fringe diet. But I was like, I love this idea. So I jumped on board, I just dove in. But I had all this family pressure, right? So in order to appease everyone around me, I was like, they were saying like, please, will you go see the oncologist, go hear what he has to say. Maybe they have some alternative therapies, whatever. So I'm like, okay, I'll go. So we go to the cancer clinic. The parking lot's packed. The waiting room's packed. I sit down, I'm looking around, and everybody in there has gray hair. I'm 26 years old. I've got a handlebar mustache, long shaggy hair, like I'm a rock dude. And everybody there's twice my age, 3 times my age, some of them, right? And I'm like, I don't belong here. Like, what am I doing here? And the TV is on. So we're sitting there like, waiting to go back, watching the TV. It's on one of the morning shows. And out comes Jack LaLanne. And Jack LaLanne starts going off about nutrition, about juicing, about fruits and vegetables. Like he's saying, like, this is why we're all so sick, because we're eating all this man-made processed food. If man made it, don't eat it. And I turn to my wife and I'm like, can you believe this is on the TV right now while I'm sitting in the cancer clinic? She's like, it's pretty weird, right? We go back to see the oncologist. He gives me this just very boilerplate, like robotic kind of pitch, like flipping through my chart, okay, well, Chris, you've got stage 3 colon cancer. It's very aggressive in young adults. We want to give you 5-FU and leucovorin. This is chemotherapy drugs. And you've got about a 60% chance of living 5 years with treatment. And I'm like thinking, well, 60%, that's like pretty close to 50%, which is kind of like a coin toss. This is not very encouraging. And then we asked him about the raw food diet. I say we because I don't remember if it was my wife or me who asked. And he says, no, you can't do that. It'll fight the chemo. I'd been on it for a week at this point. I was feeling really good. And then I said, well, are there any alternative therapies available? And at that point, his demeanor just like flipped. I mean, he went from pleasant and professional to arrogant, condescending, just started berating me. No, if you don't do chemotherapy, you're insane. And then he just went on and on and on. And like the stress and the fear just took over. And it was like deer in the headlights. You know what I mean? Like tunnel vision. Mm-hmm. He's talking to me. It's like Charlie Brown. Like I don't even know what he's saying. And I just wanted to run out of there. I mean, it was like he was just trying to intimidate me and basically just saying, if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, you're going to die. So he finished. There was one thing he said, though, that stood out. And my wife had to remind me that he said it because I was just, in that state. Is he said, look, I'm not saying this because I need your business. Right in the middle of this sort of pitch. And when he'd said it, even I'd forgotten and my wife reminded me, but when he said it, then I remember thinking in the moment, like, that's called the push away. It's a sales technique. I'm like, man, what is going on? So despite that, I get up, walk to the desk, and make an appointment to start chemotherapy in a few weeks. I mean, I was completely brainwashed, hypnotized, whatever you want to call it, just
paralyzed by fear.
Paralyzed by fear. Made the appointment. We walked to my wife's car and sat in her car and held hands and cried. And I just choked out a prayer. And it was one of the lowest points of my whole journey was that day. And I just realized that, so many cancer patients are manipulated with fear to make decisions that they wouldn't normally make. And when you're in a state of fear, your stress hormones are pumping, and you make irrational impulsive, illogical decisions. Fear-based decisions are almost always the wrong decision. We need to make decisions that are based on facts, based on faith, not on fear. And I was fortunate because I still had like maybe 3 weeks until chemo would start. And so I just went home and fired up the juicer. And I was just like, okay, I don't know what else to do. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and keep like praying like crazy and like thinking and reading and researching and just trying to figure out like, what am I going to do? Because it's like this date is approaching, you know, and the stress is increasing. Like the closer we get to this like day when I'm supposed to start. And then the day came and I woke up and I was like, I'm not doing it. Like maybe later, but not now. Like I'm just not ready to do that. And so I kind of, in my mind, put it on the back burner, much to the consternation of people around me. But I kind of looked at it like I had two paths. One path was the wide paved road that everybody was going down, right? It's brightly lit. Everybody's cheering you on. Like they're making little T-shirts with your name on it and baking.
60%.
Yeah.
For 5 years.
Cupcakes, you know, like, yay, you're a fighter. You're a survivor. You're going to beat this. And you go down the path and you get on the chemo train and it's state of the art and all your needs are met. Everybody's loving on you and bringing you little snacks and goodies and they hook you up to chemo and the suffering starts, right? Off you go. And there's no guarantee what happens at the end of the line. Do they drop you off well? Do they drop you off and say, we're sorry, we've done all we can, and send you home to die? So that's one option, and that was scary. And then the other option is basically like me hacking my way through the jungle alone in the dark, right? Like there's like barely a little path a few people have been down before. That was also scary. So I've got two scary options. But I sensed like that if I could make it through the jungle, then I could show other people how to get through. And I just knew that's the way I had to go. And even though I didn't know what the outcome would be, I was trusting God to lead me in the process. I just knew that's the way I had to go. And I wanted to live or die on my own terms. Like that was really important to me. And so that was the path I chose, into the jungle. It's like me and Jesus, that's it. I got nobody else.
Jesus and a juicer. Let's
That's
go.
it. Should have called the book Jesus and a Juicer. So someone else can use that. So the cancer clinic sent me a certified letter for not showing up to the appointment to put the port in. At first they're calling my house, you know, and eventually send the certified letter. And, you know, once I signed off on that, they're like, okay, we're done with this guy. No liability. And they left me alone. And from that point, you know, I just had this tremendous sense of freedom and relief. And I found an integrative MD. I found a naturopathic doctor. And I slowly, you know, cobbled together a support system of people who understood. And the first naturopath that I worked with was the first person to tell me you made the right decision. And I wanted to, I may have cried in his office when he told me that. You know, if I didn't cry, I was pretty close because no one had told me that, you know? And I was so just happy to have anyone like say, like, you're not crazy. Like, I understand why you're doing what you're doing. And then, yeah, he connected me with an integrative MD who was more cautious for sure, but also supported my decision because this man had worked as a conventional oncologist for his entire life. He was in his 70s, and he had just seen the system fail. Most of his patients, right? He'd seen most of them die, given the best treatments available. So he had started studying Eastern medicine, was doing IV vitamin C therapy, was doing things in his clinic that he had researched and thought would be helpful. And he also understood that it was all about the immune system. So like now everybody's talking about immunotherapy. The cancer industry is finally waking up to the immune system being a key to survival, a key to health and healing, a key to prevention. And, but we've known this in the natural world since Hippocrates, right? So I created a system for myself that was sustainable. And like that was really important because I knew like if I'm going to undergo this massive life change, like I have to be able to continue this. Like this isn't a crash diet. Like I'm not going to cure my cancer in 2 weeks with raw food. You know, I wasn't under any delusion that it was going to happen quickly. As the more I read and researched from other experts and doctors and healers and people, it was like, I realized I've got to rebuild my whole body. I have to make my body a place where cancer cannot thrive. And that takes time, right? You've got trillions of cells. They're all dying. They're regenerating. They're being replaced. And if you've been poisoning and polluting your body for years, intentionally, cigarettes and alcohol, or unintentionally with the standard American diet or drug use or whatever, it takes time to undo that damage. And so I had a very long-term perspective on healing. And so what I did was I just started juicing every day. I was making giant batches of juices every morning, drinking it throughout the day. I was eating huge salads with all of what I know now are the most potent anti-cancer vegetables: broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, onions, mushrooms, peppers, garlic. And I was making fruit smoothies with berries, which are the most potent anti-cancer fruits, and repeat. Right? It's just every day. I was eating the same thing every day. And my thought was overdose on nutrition, get as much variety of food in your body every single day, and just trust that your body can heal if you give it the right nutrients and care. So that was the dietary component of my healing journey. But there's a lot more to it, right? Because there's mental, emotional, and spiritual too. I also started exercising. So exercise is so amazing. It's so underrated. Like it literally has been proven in human studies to decrease your risk of cancer, to increase your odds of survival. Exercise is so underrated. Like if you care about preventing cancer or healing cancer, like you've got to exercise every day. And the great thing is it doesn't even matter what kind, as long as you're doing something for about 20 to 30 minutes, right?
Because of the detoxification effect of sweating or moving chi? Why is exercise?
There are multiple reasons. So when you exercise, yes, your blood is pumping, you're increasing circulation, you're increasing oxygenation, but you're also flipping genetic switches. You're flipping on cancer protective genes and you're flipping off cancer promoting genes. I mean, it's like, whoa, like no one's talking about this, but it's real. It's really happening. And yes, sweating helps detoxify your body, especially heavy metals like lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury, aluminum. So there's so many benefits to exercise. And even though I didn't know all that stuff back then, I had this instinctive idea about exercise, which was that I'm sending signals of life to my body, right? I'm telling my body to get stronger, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of wasting away. And we've all heard use it or lose it, right? And that's just kind of like, I'm going to start running. I'm going to go to gym, lift some weights. Like I just need to like.
I am strong.
Yes, I'm strong. And I had a mantra that I would repeat to myself, this internal dialogue. I'm healed. I'm healthy. I'm well. And I would just say it over and over and over in my mind. I'd say it out loud. And I was just speaking life and health into my body. That was part of the process. So this is a good transition, right, into the mental and the mental, emotional, spiritual side of healing. I developed what I call a beat cancer mindset. And as I've thought about it over the years, it's pretty simple. It's like very simple kind of mindset. And that was, I was willing to do whatever it took to get well. And I was taking full responsibility for my health. And so, and really there was no room for excuses. You know, it's like, if I'm determined to live, I'm willing to do anything to get well. In that time in my life, doing anything, was only interested in doing things that would not harm me, right? So do no harm therapies, as Hippocrates said. So if it was out there and there was no risk of harm, I'll take it, I'll do it, hook me up to it, inject it, whatever, right? And so I did everything I could find and afford. I can't say what helped and what didn't help, but I know none of it hurt me. And so at that time, again, the internet was not helpful. I went from book to book to book and was listening to like audio cassettes and VHS tapes and just anything I could find. I mean, the health and wellness stuff was so fringe at that time and not that hard, not that easy to find. I was borrowing tapes from friends of my mom's. And here's a crazy part of my story that's so amazing is my mom's been a health and wellness junkie like forever. And she had amassed this huge library of books by everybody. I mean, she had like all the Louise Hay books. She had Pablo Areola. She had raw food books. She had Dr. Richard Schultz. She had it was crazy. Like every time I would discover some other health and wellness author, guru, healer, she was like, oh yeah, I've got that book. Just stacks and stacks of these books. And she'd never been sick, never had cancer. Like she just had become a health and wellness enthusiast. And so I had this treasure trove library of information. She had all the Paul Bragg books. She had the original book by Al Carter about rebounding. It was crazy. And so I just knew this is amazing. God gave her this desire to learn all this stuff and to acquire all these books for me, right? Because she knew I would need it. She didn't know. He knew.
Yeah.
That I would need it. And so that was pretty awesome. Now, my family still thinks I'm insane, right?
Including your mom?
My mom did not.
Okay.
My mom supported me, but in my mind, it didn't really count because it was my mom. Right. But in hindsight, I'm really glad, obviously, that she wasn't against me too, right? And against me is a strong word, but you understand. They just didn't understand. They didn't know how to support me. But my wife came around pretty quick. So I don't want to throw her under the bus. After that appointment with the oncologist where he said, just the weird things he said to us, raw food will fight the chemo, and if you don't,
I don't need your business.
I don't need your business. If you don't do chemotherapy, you're insane. After that appointment, she was like, okay, this guy's a jerk. I just couldn't believe that he treated us that way. So she was cautiously supportive. Does that make sense? Because she was just afraid I was going to die, But I just kept on and kept on. And that's when once I got the diet and exercise stuff going, that's when I started thinking about my mindset and my emotions. And I realized that I had become, in my formative years, very insecure, very judgmental, critical, easily jealous and envious and resentful towards other people, and it used humor, as a coping mechanism. I was pretty funny. Me and my sort of pack of friends, we were all I consider very funny people, and we're always trying to make each other laugh, and we're also very mean. And being, years away from it, it's obvious we were just insecure little kids, But I just realized, man, I've got a lot of work to do. I really have got to start changing the way I'm thinking about myself and about other people. And so there's a concept in the Bible called take every thought captive, right? And it's they call it mindfulness now, right? Catching yourself in a thought that's negative and then choosing not to think that way. And so when I would start to be critical or judgmental, I would just catch myself and be like, no, I'm not going to think that way about this person. I'm going to choose to believe the best about this person. When I would start feeling insecure or worried, I would catch those thoughts. And if it was fear, which was creeping in every day, I would just catch it and I would just give it to God. I'd say, God, I'm giving you my fear. It's all yours. I'm not going to carry it. I trust you. I'm not going to be afraid. And so sort of one by one, thought by thought, right? I started retraining my brain, and anyone can do this. You are not a lot of us get in this sort of repetitive loop of thoughts, right? And we think this is who I am because this is what I'm thinking. But you are not what you think. You're what you choose to think. So I started choosing to think differently about myself and others. And that made a huge difference, like just massive in the way I felt, in my attitude, in my emotions. And we know that negativity and bitterness and resentment, right? All negative emotions produce stress in your mind, which translates into stress in your body. So the things I said before, like jealousy and envy and bitterness, shame and guilt, resentment, all of those negative thoughts, being critical, having prejudices, they all produce stress in your body. And when your stress hormones are elevated because of your thoughts, it creates an environment where cancer can thrive. Mm-hmm. Because what stress hormones do, and I'm not the first person to talk about this in the series, I'm sure, is they increase inflammation and suppress your immune function. And that is the pro-cancerous state right there. Inflammation plus a suppressed immune system leads to disease, not just cancer, heart disease, liver disease, lung disease. I mean, there's a whole host of chronic diseases, diabetes, that thrive in those environments. Stress also leads us to cope in ways that are very unhealthy. So there's the direct effect in the body, and then there's the indirect where we are coping with stress by overeating, by drinking alcohol, by smoking cigarettes, by taking illegal or legal drugs, and becoming a sex addict, becoming a workaholic. Like all of those things are coping mechanisms for pain. And so I didn't want to dive into this, like, let's just say down this rabbit hole, because like most people, when I first started reading information that was leading down this path, I thought, like, I'm good. Like I don't really have stress. That's not my problem. Like can't think of anybody I need to forgive.
No emotional trauma.
No, I'm good. But in the back of my mind, I was kind of like, it would be stupid for me to not turn over every stone, right? And try to get to the root cause of this disease. Because if the root cause for me is my emotional state, right? Bitterness and resentments and things, like I should probably try to sort that out. So I just started thinking about it, thinking about things I didn't want to think about, right? Thinking about people who'd hurt me in my past, thinking about resentments and little issues I had with people. And when I focused my attention on it, I realized, okay, I've got some work to do. And we all do, right? We all carry hurt. We all carry pain. Everyone's been hurt. People hurt each other intentionally, unintentionally. It just happens. People let you down. They are deliberately cruel to you sometimes. And I made a decision to forgive every person who had ever hurt me in life.
Easier said than done, huh?
Yeah, definitely easier said than done. But surprisingly not that hard to do. Because what I realized that forgiveness is not a feeling. And this is one of the most powerful concepts that really changed it for me. Forgiveness isn't a feeling. Most of us think, I'll forgive when I'm not mad anymore, when I'm not hurt, when I'm not upset, when I'm not in pain. But forgiveness is just a choice. When you forgive, you choose to let it go. You choose to not hold it against them anymore. That's what forgiveness is. It's a choice, letting it go. And your feelings change after you make the choice. And that's where people get stuck, right? They get stuck in this negative cycle of pain and unforgiveness and resentment, thinking at some point they'll get out of it, but they don't realize the only way out is to make a choice to forgive. Forgiveness heals your heart. That's what it does. When people hurt you, they injure your heart, right? It's like stab you in the heart. They stomp on it, like they cut it and bruise it. And the more people that hurt you, right? The more beat up and bruised and sick your heart becomes. And so I don't know, this stuff was just all percolating in my mind, and I'm like trying to figure out like, what do I need to do? And it was like, I just need to forgive. Like, okay, I don't care anymore. Like, nothing is worth holding on to a grudge. Like, death is not worth it for me. Disease is not worth it for me. There's nothing worth dying over. And so I just got quiet, and I started this practice of forgiveness where I just close my eyes and I would start kind of digging through the memory banks, like thinking through my life, thinking about second grade, third grade, high school, just thinking about the people in my life, friends, family members, acquaintances, strangers, whoever that had come into my life that had hurt me in some way. And it could be a very small way, like that one little mean thing that a kid said to me on a playground one time. Could be a big way, like friends who betrayed my trust and, really hurt me. And one by one, as I would think of these people, I would just say, God, you know what they did. You know how I feel about it. And it still hurts. But I'm choosing to forgive. I'm letting it go. And I'm giving it to you. They're all yours. I'm not going to carry it anymore. And I'm asking you to bless them. As much as I would prefer that you did not, right? I would prefer a lightning bolt, if possible. I'm asking you to bless them. Bless their family, bless their business, whatever. And something amazing happens when you not only make a decision to forgive, right? To let it go, give them to God, right? They're all yours. You can deal with them. But when you also ask him to bless them, like, that's just like when you open your heart up and say, okay, like, come on in, heal it, right? And you see them the way God sees them, right? You have compassion for this person who has hurt you, and you realize, I'm no better than them, right? They're hurting too. They've hurt me. And something just amazing happens when you ask God to bless the people who've hurt you. I mean, Jesus said, love your enemies and pray for those who've persecuted you. That's some pretty good advice, right? Pretty good advice. So that's what I started doing. Just one by one, by name, just like, and you can't just be like, okay, I forgive everybody, like in one fell swoop. Everyone is forgiven, right? It doesn't work. Like, you have to just like get in that place where you're thinking of them, you're thinking of the thing, and you really just let it go, make the decision. So I worked through that. And surprisingly, there was just a lot of little stuff in my life, in my past, that I just realized, like, I've moved on from that, but I've never actually said, I forgive them. And so now I'm going to. The nice thing about forgiveness is you don't have to tell the person you forgave them. You don't have to see him again. You don't have to talk to him. This is between you and God. That's it. So it is much easier than I think maybe some people realize. The other thing about forgiveness that's so important is that it's a decision for life. It's like a healthy diet. Like if you eat healthy for a week, it doesn't really help you very much, right? Or a month. If you want to stay healthy, then you have to eat healthy for life. And forgiveness is the same way. Like, it only works if you stick with it, right? So you make the decision and it's like, I'm forgiving you for life. Now, if they hurt you again, you got to forgive them for the new thing, right? So, but what forgiveness really is it's like cleaning out all of the trash, all the garbage, all this stuff that's accumulated in your mind, in your heart, in your spirit. It's like taking it out. Taking out the trash, like take it to the curb, right? Let God come by and pick it up, the garbage truck, right? And it's out of your life. And if feelings start to creep back in, because they will, right? When they start to creep back in, you just have to remind yourself, like, no, I forgive them, right? I'm not going to entertain this bitterness or resentment or whatever. And it is the most powerful way to heal yourself of pain is forgiveness. I mean, it's the most important thing that a cancer patient can do, that anyone can do. And I've met a lot of people, a lot of cancer patients. I've seen people heal miraculously of all types and stages of disease. And this is a common thread for all of them. And I've also seen people do everything right. Maybe it's conventional, maybe it's alternative, maybe it's both, and not forgive and hold on to bitterness and resentment and not get well. It was like, I can't say for sure, but appears to be the obvious barrier to healing. And I believe it is. You can do everything right, but stress, bitterness, resentment, unforgiveness will prevent you from healing if you don't deal with them.
That's what Joan Borisenko told me. She said, she was one of the pioneers of mind-body medicine and running a mind-body clinic. And she said the only difference between the ones that came back healed and the ones that didn't heal was almost always the ones that didn't heal were holding on to bitterness and resentment or regret.
I went down to visit an alternative cancer clinic in Mexico a couple of years ago, and I was talking to the patients there, and some of them knew who I was and stuff. And there was one woman there who I hadn't met because she had stomach cancer. She was really sick and had just stayed in her room the whole time. And I was talking to her husband on the couch about their situation. And after we chatted, he went back into his room and she said, "Is Chris Wark sitting outside the room?" And he said, "Yeah. How did you know?" And she said, "I recognized his voice." She'd been watching my videos on YouTube or whatever. And he came back out. He came right back out and told me. And I turned and looked, and I could see her in the room. And I said, "Do you want to talk or whatever?" And she said, "Yeah." So she comes out and she's hunched over because the pain was so bad that she hobbles out, hunched over, and sits down on the couch. And, I'm just thinking, like, God, what can I say to this person? Like, how can I encourage this person? Like, what, And we're talking, and it just came out of my mouth, and I just said, "Who do you need to forgive?" And she just lost it. I mean, just the tears, right, just started coming. And I said, "I tell you what, let's just do this right now. Like, you need to forgive somebody real bad." And she was like, "Yeah." And so I held her hand and we prayed together, and I just kind of led her through that prayer, that just really simple, like, forgiveness prayer. And she said, "Is it okay if I pray in Korean?" I said, yeah. And so I'm praying, and she's kind of praying with me, and she's like just a snotty mess. I mean, it's just so beautiful, just sobbing and just all over me. And it was just like so sweet. And so we kind of finished up and visited for a little while. And then she went back to her room. And the next morning I had a flight that was really early. And so I left. And as I was getting ready to leave, early in the morning, her husband came out, and he said, "Man, you won't believe what happened." I said, "What?" He said, "She went back to bed and slept for a little while. And then at some point in the night, she got up and went to the bathroom." And he said, when she got out of bed, he said, she stood straight up. He said, she hasn't stood straight up since we got here. And then I got to the airport, and there was a message from her, a Facebook message, and she said, she said a lot of things, but what really hit home for me was she said, "Thank you so much. You taught me how to release pain." And she did. And that's what forgiveness is. It's releasing that pain.
That's amazing. It's a lesson for all of us. So just, I guess, now you've given us the picture of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual approach that you took to your healing, and that I feel is really important. because any aspect of those can cause an inflammatory reaction, a stress reaction, and suppress your immune system. So you might as well tick off all the chapters, right? You address the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. How does your story end? You've been cancer-free for how many years?
Spoiler alert.
Sorry.
Yes, I'm not a hologram. Did not die.
Yay.
I just celebrated my 15-year cancerversary.
Woo.
Yeah. Those first few years were very intense. And I was getting blood work drawn every month. I was getting CT scans every 6 months. Like everyone around me, and especially the medical doctor that I was working with, he knew how high the stakes were. And he even wrote a letter to the naturopath saying, I'm very concerned about Chris. We've got to get his immune system up. For a patient like him, the outlook is very grim. But I just stayed the course, like day in, day out. I just took massive action to change my whole life. And some people watching this might think, well, I couldn't do that. It's so intimidating. It's so much to do. And the truth is there is a lot to do. But all those small changes add up to big results, And so I didn't fix everything overnight. I didn't become the person I am overnight. It was just reading, researching, making changes, like little by little, day by day. Now made some big changes overnight, like the raw food diet. That was overnight. But the other stuff took time. And so it's changing your life is a process. Rebuilding your body is a process. And so for me, just understanding that it was going to take time and to be patient and be persistent and diligent, right? And determined to just keep going and keep going and keep going and not give up. And so one day I woke up and it was like almost 5 years had gone by and had another scan, no recurrence. And it was like, I saw an oncologist who had taken over for the previous guy had retired, and the new oncologist was like, looks like you're in the clear. Like, congratulations, 5 years. This is great, And it was about a year later, I decided, gosh, I got to tell my story. Like, somebody out there is going to be encouraged. Somebody out there needs to hear this. Like, somebody out there is feeling exactly the way I did when I was diagnosed. And so that's when I started Chris Beat Cancer, the blog. It was 2010. So, and then from there, it's just been really incredible. I mean, my life has changed in every way. And I never thought I would be talking about this and telling my story in so many different venues and places and countries. Like, it's just crazy what it's turned into. And I thought I was going to start a blog and put it online and then I'd never have to tell my story again. That was my plan. Like, I didn't want to think about cancer. That's kind of the funny thing is, like, I waited 6.5 years before telling my story publicly. I didn't want to talk about cancer. I wanted to just continue doing music and real estate, and I wanted to get as far away from it as I could. But, I just came to that realization where it was like, this is important. And I know this will help people. I've got to talk about it. And it's taken over my life now.
For a good reason. Yeah, I think it's so important to not only inform people, but also inspire them with stories of possibility, right? You represent, you have the Beat Cancer mindset. You took massive action, like you said, and you hacked your way through the dark jungle in order to light the way for someone else. Because it is such a knee-jerk response. I mean, I've done all this work, and if I went in and got that diagnosis tomorrow, I would, the fear would take my focus to here, and I think I would be able to breathe my way back to perspective and go, okay, wait a second, I've been given all these tools and all this knowledge and all this inspiration. I can do this. I'm going to take the jungle route. But, it's just so important to, if you know that there's stories like you out there that of just demonstrating what's possible, and then getting the information about how the mind the diet and your emotions, and then your spiritual tools of like forgiveness, all affect the health of your physical body and your gene expression. With the two of those, you can hold space so you're not sucked down into the fear. You don't become a powerless victim with diagnosis. And you can block out the noise of other people's fears, whether it's the doctor's or a loved one, and follow your instinct, your true north, you know? Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah. And, one other thing I want to add too is that my story is just one of thousands. And I'm constantly interviewing people who have healed against the odds, with terminal diagnosis or whatever. And there's so many, the movement is building. There's just story after story after story is just coming out, it seems like every week, that it's just really exciting, and it's not about like, don't do chemo, do carrot juice, right? It's about take control of your life and your health, do everything you can do to help yourself. There's so much you can do besides or in addition to conventional treatment. That gives you your power back. And so that's just all I want to do is inspire people and encourage them and support them and give them information and resources that they can use to make the best decision for them, right? To take the best care of themselves, to drop their risk of recurrence as low as possible, right? Or drop their risk of ever getting cancer as low as possible, and have the best quality of life if they're dealing with end-stage disease or whatever. So at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about giving people the tools they can use to help themselves so they can make a wise decision.
Totally. And there's so many different types of people, different backgrounds. And, you had this instinct and this gut feeling that your body couldn't sustain chemo. And then you had this reference in the past that chemo was poison, and poisoning yourself back to health didn't make sense to you. But there's also people that were maybe raised by doctors, or they believe that, they trust their oncologist and they believe that that's the right course of action for them. But the ones but they sustain their immune system through that conventional treatment by doing the emotional, mental, and spiritual work as well, and the nutritional overhaul, So there's no cookie cutter response, but you have to be aware that you've got to address it from every layer, and nutrition being an absolutely necessary foundation, and then also the mental, emotional, and spiritual work. So
your choices matter.
Yeah.
That's the deal. You're not a powerless victim. Your choices matter. Like what you choose to do today can either produce health or disease tomorrow. It's your choice.
Amen. So you touched briefly upon how much pressure, because of their own fears and their love for you, that it's hard to navigate people going, oh my God, you have to do chemo. Are you crazy? Like, do what the doctors say because they want you to live. So how do you navigate other people's fears?
It's difficult. But what I did and what I encourage other people to do is, to sit those people down in their life who are putting this pressure on them and just say, listen, I know you love me. I love you. I know you want me to live, but I just need you to trust me that I am not in denial, right? I don't have my head in the sand. I know the risk, but also trust me that I'm making the best decisions for me, and that I'm doing everything that I can do to survive and thrive, like to be well and to live. That's what I want. And I think if you just explain it in those terms, people around you will understand. And then, it helps to say, and I know you mean well, but you're giving me a lot of stress and anxiety. So can we not talk about this, for a while? So that helps.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, you're not going blind into the jungle. You can check in and keep monitoring your progress. And then if it's not going the right direction, you either switch directions or, that chemo is always there for you. You know what I mean?
Yep. There's always chemo, or whatever the treatment is that someone does or doesn't want to do. The main thing that's so important is that people are not rushed into a decision based on fear, that they understand the risks, the benefits, the likelihood of survival, the likelihood that a treatment will actually cure them versus just shrinking a tumor temporarily. Like, this is information that takes time to research and learn before you say yes. And I created a free guide for patients called 20 Questions for Your Oncologist that they can download from my site. And it gives them the absolute best questions to ask so they can make a smart decision about treatment. And also will give them a sense on how caring the oncologist is, because if their oncologist is willing to answer those questions graciously, then they know they've got a good person. But if they're very short-tempered and irritated and irritable and don't want to answer important questions, then you might need to get a second opinion.
That's perfect. And also, cancer doesn't develop overnight, right? So even if you're in a late stage, often you find yourself getting the diagnosis on Thursday and they want to rush you into surgery the next day or chemo on Monday, right? So how can people trust that they have a couple weeks to do the research? How much time does someone at stage 4 have to really feel like it's the best course of action for them?
Well, you never know how much time somebody has, right? It's always a guess. But stage 4 is a really unique situation because if you ask your doctor, can this be cured directly? The answer is usually no. So when you have that answer of no, we don't have a cure for your disease, all we have is chemo or radiation or surgery or whatever to hopefully buy you more time, that actually frees you up, right? Again, I've met so many stage 4 cancer patients who, in hindsight, realized that the stage 4 diagnosis was a blessing in disguise because it freed them, right, to take control of their life and pull out all the stops, right? Versus the, oh no, we can definitely cure you. It's highly treatable, highly curable type, stage 2 or 3 cancer, right? Or stage 1, obviously. So there's a study that's pretty alarming that almost 3/4 of late stage cancer patients did not know that the treatment they were getting was curative or palliative. And they thought it was curative, right? Nearly 3/4 of them, they were not told that this treatment has no chance of curing you. It's only to buy you, hopefully, a little more time. That's pretty scary, right? And look, doctors are in a system that is so difficult to operate in. They're not the bad guys. It's the system. I mean, they only can see you for 15 to 20 minutes, right? They got to, rush patients in and out like turning tables at a restaurant just to stay profitable. Their expenses are exorbitant. Physicians have the highest rate of suicide of any profession. Like, it's a terrible profession in a lot of ways. It really grinds up physicians, and patients suffer as a result of this system that treats its own people so badly. So I don't want to in any way sound like I'm demonizing doctors, because they're just trapped in a really kind of a terrible system. At least in the U.S., it's better in some countries. They have more freedom, more medical freedom. But in the U.S., it's really tightly controlled. And if they deviate at all from standard of care, they risk losing their medical license.
Yeah, and we're in a sue-happy society, unfortunately. So can you touch upon just a couple of other modalities that you incorporated, just for people that are...
So I did hardcore nutrition, but then I also was kind of doing any other alternative, integrative, non-toxic therapy, whatever you want to call them, that I could find and afford. And it was pretty limited for me in Memphis, Tennessee in 2004, but IV vitamin C was a very powerful therapy. In high doses, vitamin C has direct anti-cancer benefits in the body, kills cancer cells. We know that IV vitamin C combined with chemotherapy actually makes the chemo work better in some human trials they've done. So that was a big one for me. I feel like that was really helpful. I took a ton of herbal supplements and a lot of targeted nutraceuticals from my naturopath, who was looking at my body, and we did like hair tests, urine tests, stool set tests, saliva tests, he was trying to get a picture, right, of what was going on, and to help me address, did I have a viral or parasite overload? Did I have yeast or fungus? Did I have heavy metals? And so were there any nutritional deficiencies that we needed to address directly? So these are all, I feel, very important things that a patient needs to look at. And these are things that a typical medical doctor or oncologist probably won't be looking at. And so if you want to get to the bottom of root causes, and cancer has many causes, right? Many root causes. It's a cascade of a variety of factors in your life that all sort of come together in a perfect storm, right? And create this environment where cancer can thrive. So you have to, systematically chip away at it, right? And sort of untangle the web, right? Untangle the knots. And so with herbal supplements and nutraceuticals and all these things, I was just sort of trying to get to the bottom of any potential problems in my body. And we didn't discover anything like extremely revelatory, but my attitude was, if it's not going to hurt me, if it could help, I'll take it, right? And I can afford it, So I definitely had budgetary limitations. Cancer's expensive. Organic food can be expensive. Supplements are expensive. So I just did what I could when I could, and just trusted that if my body needed it, it would use it. If it didn't, I'll pee it out.
Talk about cancer. And I heard you say one time that tumor is actually a symptom. The tumor is not the problem. So reframing someone's visual of what's going on in their body.
Cancer is largely misunderstood. And there's over 200 different types of cancer. It's a lot of different diseases under that umbrella. And cancer is actually natural and normal. We all have thousands of cancer cells in our body. That's kind of scary. But your immune system is designed to identify and eliminate those cells. Natural killer cells in your immune system kill cancer cells. That's their job. And so the difference between someone with tumors or no tumors is largely due to the strength of their immune system. So a tumor is not the real problem, right? The tumor is a symptom of a systemic disease. Like, it's a head-to-toe disease. There's something wrong with your system. And the tumor is a manifestation of that disease. So that's why in many cases when you cut a tumor off, cancer comes back, right? Or you poison it, it starts growing later. Or you radiate it, it starts growing again eventually. This is why, because the tumor wasn't the real problem. It's the symptom. So in order to heal cancer, stop it, reverse it, survive it, however you want to phrase it, the goal of the conventional industry and the natural holistic industry approach is the same. The goal is to create an environment where cancer can't thrive. But the difference is, on one hand, the environment is very toxic, right? So chemotherapy drugs are very toxic. So it creates this toxic environment. Cancer cells are, dying because it's so toxic, but so are lots of other cells. There's a lot of collateral damage. The natural health community, the holistic community, is trying to create an environment where cancer can't thrive by rebuilding the body, right? By restoring nutritional deficiency, by restoring optimal function, by
strengthening the immune system.
Strengthening the immune system, detoxification, nutritional support, all of those things. So they're both, working toward the same goal, but it's two very different approaches, right? And so I was definitely attracted to the approach that is the do no harm approach, that let's build my body up, let's improve my nutrition, let's detoxify, let's address any type of bacterial, fungal, pathogenic problems, heavy metal toxicity or whatever, and build up, boost my immune system so that my body can heal and stay well, right? There's a drawback of many conventional therapies, which is they have a short-term benefit and a long-term detriment, right? So I like to say that they're a short-term solution to a long-term problem, right? Because you can shrink a tumor, but what happens is, and what most people don't know, is that there's basically two types of cancer cells. There's the fast dividing cells that make up the bulk of a tumor, and then there's the slow dividing cells. And those are cancer stem cells. So chemotherapy targets those fast dividing cells. Well, your hair is fast dividing, your nails are fast dividing, your saliva, the lining of your digestive system. So all those things are affected by chemotherapy, right? And those fast dividing cells are too. So they die, the tumor shrinks during chemo, and it may shrink a lot. But the problem is the slow dividing cancer stem cells are often not affected by chemotherapy. And what it does to them is it makes them more resistant and more aggressive. And so when treatment is done for a time, 6 months or 3 months or some period of time goes by, another scan is done, and now there's new spots, right? Now you've got spots in your bones or your brain or your lungs or your liver because the cancer stem cells are more aggressive and your immune system was destroyed by the chemo. So it's like kind of like a double whammy. So this isn't me saying never do chemo, but this is me saying you need to understand the benefits and risks, right? Short-term benefit, sure, but there is a long-term risk of more aggressive cancer and a suppressed immune system that may not be able to ever recover fully.
And is it true that raw food will disrupt chemo?
So when my oncologist said raw food will fight the chemo, I had to do some research to figure out what he was talking about. And I didn't get an answer from him directly, but I have two explanations. One is that there was sort of a long-standing belief in the medical community that cancer patients need to eat a neutropenic diet. Neutropenic means a cooked diet, a diet that has no bacteria, right? So because they know they're destroying your immune system with chemo, and so they're concerned that if you ate an apple, right, that had some bacteria on it, that you might end up with a bacterial infection, right, from otherwise harmless bacteria because your immune system is decimated. So there was a fear about cancer patients eating raw food. That has since been scientifically sort of debunked, dispelled, whatever. It's not really a threat. And the other explanation is that, when you're on a raw food diet, it's such an aggressive detoxification diet, your body becomes really good at detoxifying. So when you give chemotherapy to a person on a raw food diet, the body tends to kick it out quickly. It's not as harmful, doesn't do as much damage as they want. And so, they're not very compatible. Also, when you're on chemo, everything tastes terrible. So it's very difficult to eat a raw food diet on chemo because food just tastes so bad. Like chemo patients, all they want to eat is like mashed potatoes, and bread, just like really bland, starchy carb type foods, or sugary food.
So in the last 9 years that you've been sharing your story and working with people and helping guide people through this process, have you encountered anyone with, some of the more serious or terminal cancers that people think or have been told that are incurable, like pancreatic, lung, and brain cancer? And have you encountered people that have healed in your kind of manner, holistically?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I've even interviewed people who have healed pancreatic, lung cancer, and brain cancer. And so I've seen people heal all types and stages of cancer. And it's really exciting, And sometimes they did it completely all natural. Some of them did it after chemotherapy and conventional therapies failed. And then some of them did it in combination of both. But, I just celebrate all those successes. Like, I'm so excited anytime I meet someone who's healed advanced cancer against the odds, was supposed to die, right? It was given an expiration date and thrived through it, and they're doing well. So yeah, there's some interviews like that on the site, and they just keep coming.
So the stories are out there, they just find them and follow what they did. Okay. So, cancer-free, 15 years, right? Does fear ever creep back in where like a thought of doubt, like maybe all my confidence is for naught, or what if cancer comes back, or you feel a little pain? Does that ever happen, or are you fully in faith and trust of the human body.
Every cancer patient who ever has a pain always thinks, is that more cancer? Right?
Yikes.
Like always. But especially in the beginning, like in the early, first couple of years, you think every little pain is like, oh no, is it in my big toe? But as time has gone by, and obviously with scans and blood work, my confidence has increased that, especially after I crossed the 10-year mark, right? Then it was that was a huge milestone for me. So I don't think about it much. I don't worry about it, but I live my life in a way that is very much oriented toward prevention because I'm only 41. So I've got, hopefully, God willing, at least 40 to 50 more years of life, maybe 60. And that's a long time, right? Any type of cancer could develop in my body over the next 40 to 60 years. So I'm very conscientious of that. And so I just take care of myself in really the same way that I did. I'm not quite as hardcore as I was when I was in my healing phase, but I eat a plant-based diet. I exercise almost every day. I'm constantly aware of my thoughts and my emotions. I'm quick to forgive, right? People are mean to me on the internet, okay? And I just, sometimes it does, it stings, sometimes it hurts, and I just forgive them. I say, God, I forgive them, bless them,
Beautiful.
I don't know why they're attacking me, but it's fine, it's okay. So I am living now. There was a time in my life when I was living to heal cancer. And now my focus is just longevity, right? I want to live a long life, free of chronic disease. And hopefully my wife and I have made a pact that we're going to die at the same time in our sleep.
Beautiful. Nice. At 101 years old.
At 100, 90's okay. It's fine. Whenever it happens. We just want to die on the same day.
Oh. So you have this beat cancer mentality, and I think there's a small percentage of the population that may have that naturally. But then there's a lot of others that maybe sometimes get a secondary gain from their diagnosis. It's the first time they've gotten attention from loved ones. It's an excuse to quit a job that they hated. All of these little gains that may keep them dangerously in that victim mindset. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's not uncommon. It's not uncommon. And it's sad, too, because what you said is exactly what happens for a lot of people is they, maybe for the first time in their life, have felt loved and cared for and supported. All of a sudden people are calling, they're emailing, they're stopping by, they're bringing food, they're spending quality time with them. They're, just getting so much love as a victim, as a patient, that they start to learn to like it, right? And secretly don't want it to end. And that's a dangerous sort of, trap is the word I want to use, but it might not be the best word, but it's a dangerous place to be in psychologically. But I've seen it happen many times where the patient they just like all the sympathy and they thrive on it. And when you or anyone is trying to help them, you find that they really don't want to do anything to help themselves. And I learned really early on that I just needed to focus my attention on the people who wanted help. And I realized most people don't want my help, right? I'm okay with that. But the people who do, that's who I pour into. That's who I serve. And there's so much satisfaction and fulfillment and joy that comes from helping someone who actually wants your help versus trying to help somebody who doesn't, right? And I see that, unfortunately, a lot of times with a loved one of a cancer patient, right? The cancer patient has to be in the driver's seat of their healing journey. They've got to be the one driving the car. You can't hog tie them and throw them in the trunk, and be the driver. It doesn't work. But I see that a lot, where the spouse or the brother or the sister or the child or somebody is nagging the patient to exercise, nagging them to eat healthy, nagging them like, why don't eat ice cream and pizza? You shouldn't be doing that, you know? And there's a variety of explanations why a patient won't take care of themselves. But one of them that sounds surprising, but it's well documented, is that some cancer patients, they just don't have a strong will to live. And that's okay, you know? They may be depressed. The diagnosis might have actually come as a relief to them because it means my life will be ending soon. And for them, that's good news. For others, if they're, older, they may be content and satisfied with the life that they've lived. And so they don't have a strong will to live another maybe 10 years, to 90 or something, right? Or from 90 to 100. That's okay too, But I think it's really important if you're a caregiver of someone with cancer that you sort of look for those signs, look for those clues to see if the patient really does have a strong will to live. If they do, it's very obvious. They're willing to change. Right? They're willing to change their diet. They're willing to forgive. They're willing to exercise. They're willing to do whatever it takes. And if they're not willing to change, then they either don't have a strong will to live or they may be secretly self-sabotaging. And people that are doing that can be brought out of it. But it's just something that you got to kind of learn, look for the clues and learn to identify.
Do you think that's rooted in a maybe subconscious belief of I am not enough, I'm not worthy, which, I think we all have.
I was deeply insecure. I did not love myself. I secretly hated myself. And I believe that cancer is a manifestation of those emotions. Because, if you hate yourself, think about it. It's like you're corrupting your body, right? You're not sending signals of life and health to your body when you're entertaining all these negative, critical, like self-critical thoughts and emotions. You're sending like signals of decay and death. So, when I recognized that in my own life, it was like, oh, I've got to stop this, because I did not want to die. One of the most pivotal moments in my cancer journey, my healing journey, was I was seeing a bodywork practitioner, and she said, before I get started, I need to ask you something. Do you really want to live? And I was like, I literally felt like this wave of fear when she asked me that, because I'd never asked myself that, and I didn't even know the answer, and I it was almost like time stopped, and it was like seeing your life flash before your eyes. And I was like thinking, do I want to live? Do I secretly have a death wish? Like, is this why I'm sick? Because, I hate myself. Like, it was just crazy. Like, it was such an amazing, powerful, like revelatory moment. And I was secretly afraid that this is why I had cancer, right? It was because I didn't really want to live. All I was focused on was not dying, right? And there's a difference between not wanting to die and wanting to live. And in that moment, this sort of like chaotic, like brain, I don't even know what, it's like moment, I realized that I had a choice. And so I was like, yes, I want to live. I'm choosing to live.
And does that result in now a newfound self-love? Your self-hatred just dissolved because you now have this will to live? Is it just becoming conscious of that?
The emotions that I had struggled with didn't dissolve, right? But once I made that decision, like I'm choosing to live, I realized, okay, now I have to do everything in my power to promote life and health in my body. And I had reasons to live for too. And that was the other thing I realized, like, what do I have to live for? And I ask patients this all the time because I feel like they need to be very clear. Do you want to live? And what do you have to live for? And so for me at the time, I had, it's hard to talk about. I had two reasons to live. I had, I couldn't bear the thought of my wife, who I'd been dating for 6 years, married for 2, and my parents, I'm an only child, standing at my graveside, right? Like putting me in the ground. Like I couldn't bear that thought. And so that was what I had to live for. Like in the very beginning, it was like for my wife and my parents, like I can't let these people bury me. Like it just broke my heart, you know? And then another cool thing happened after the diagnosis. I obviously became acutely aware of my own mortality. And I was thinking, well, gosh, like how much time do I have left? Like what do I want to do with my life? Like what do I want to experience? What do I want to accomplish? And I thought at the top of the list wasn't skydiving. I wanted to be a dad. And I asked my wife, like, you know, what do you think about starting a family? And she made just the most courageous decision of anybody I know. She said yes. She said yes to like have a child with me, not knowing if I would be alive to help her raise it. And so we started trying, and she got pregnant like right away. And so then I had something else to live for, right? I had this baby on the way now. So it just kind of added fuel to my fire. And 1 year after my diagnosis, I was back in the hospital. And this time I was holding a beautiful little baby girl. And it was like, I mean, just such an amazing moment, you know? Just 1 year later, like my whole life had changed. And having that will to live and being clear on that I wanted to live and what I had to live for was a huge turning point, like in my mental journey through cancer.
Yeah. Did you read Radical Remission by Kelly Turner?
Yeah, yeah. Later. I mean,
yeah. So she's, you know, everything that you've talked about in your story, you are basically someone that she studied. She did 1,500 clinical research, you know, I mean, like legit scientific research of these people who healed from late stage cancer when they were told they couldn't. And one of them is having strong reasons for living. Of these 9 things that all of these people did, and you've described all of them, but that's a really good one.
I was one of her people.
Yeah.
She quoted me in her book.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're a walking embodiment.
I love Kelly. She's
remission.
awesome.
Yeah. So what is your one takeaway message on healing for people that are watching and want a dose of hope?
I think the most important thing that I have to share with the world, right, is this message that your choices matter. You have options. Your decisions have created your reality, right? Your past decisions have created this reality that you experience now, and your decisions now can and will create your future. And you have so much power to affect your future based on your choices. You're not a powerless victim. And like for me, like when I realized those things, it gave me so much excitement, enthusiasm, encouragement, hope, inspiration, motivation, like all these things that you need in life that help you, right? Especially if you're trying to heal something serious like cancer. And so all I try to do is just like give back to the cancer community, to the health and wellness community, to anybody that wants to listen, give them the ideas and resources and inspiration that they can use to help themselves. And at the end of the day, it does all boil down to your choices, how you choose to think, right? How you choose to feed your body, how you choose to take care of it through exercise, how you choose not to abuse it, and choosing to forgive.